Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. Toxic confections. Beep, beep. Catherine put on her oven mitts and pulled out the hot tray of chocolate chip cookies from the oven. She turned the oven off before the timer could beep again. Working quickly, she lifted the cookies off the sheet and onto a cooling rack. She cleaned as she went, making sure not to leave any crumbs on the counter or any dirty dishes out. Brendan would be coming home shortly, and she wanted everything to be perfect. She had gone out earlier to buy a large brown rug for the living room and situated it underneath the coffee table. She had seen rugs used in the movies. She was careful to use cash, as she didn't want the purchase on her credit card. Catherine hoped he wouldn't notice the new rug right away, but if he did, she'd just tell him she wanted to spruce the place up a bit, which she rarely ever got to do. Their home was always so clean and welcoming, though. Nothing was ever out of place. Brendan's friends loved coming over here for football Sundays. She would shower them with snacks, beer, and witty commentary as she portrayed herself as the perfect housewife. She checked the clock. 3:44 p.m. He would be getting home in less than half an hour. Her breathing quickened, and her heart starting beating hard against her chest. She'd been meticulously planning this for weeks, and now it was only 20 mins away from happening. If this doesn't work, I'm dead. This needs to work. She had gone to the library and read through too many books to get this wrong. Everything, down to the measurements she needed. And the phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. Hello? Catherine slowly picked up the phone on the edge of the counter. She wasn't allowed to have a cell phone, so the only other option was a landline, which sucked because it had no caller ID, so she often had to deal with telemarketers. Hey, Kat. How are you? The familiar voice on the other end asked. Her sister was one of the only people in her life that still talked to her. Catherine had slowly pushed everyone else away over the last few years, becoming quite isolated. Hi, Becca. I'm good. How are you? How's Brian? The kids? She asked, trying to sound normal, and hoping the answers would be quick, so that she could get back to preparing for tonight. We're all great. I hope we can get together soon. It feels like I haven't seen you in ages. We need to go for dinner or drinks soon, Becca exclaimed. She always sounds so bubbly and happy. I wish I could be like that, Catherine thought to herself. Maybe one day soon. Yes, I'd love to. Sorry, I've been so busy lately with work. I just haven't gotten around to seeing anyone. We will hang out soon, though. I promise. This was a lie. Catherine hadn't worked in 3 years, but she'd been lying for so long about it that changing her story now felt impossible. The truth was, she couldn't let her sister see the bruises and cuts that marked her body, the ones that showed up too often and were sometimes too hard to hide. A week ago, one of Catherine's old classmates from college had recognized her when she was at dinner with Brendan. A tall, attractive man she had known only because they had done a couple of group projects together in English class. She did her best to end the conversation quickly, feigning disinterest, but the damage was already done. The drive home that night was silent. But as soon as they got through the front door, Brendan screamed at her, accused her of cheating with this man, whose name she couldn't even remember. "You are such a whore. You open your legs for every man out there, don't you? Am I not good enough for you? Is that it? You think you can do better than me? No, I barely even know him." In between sobs, Catherine had tried to reassure him that nothing was going on. "I haven't spoken to him since college, and nothing ever happened between us." "Bullshit!" His fist hit her in the stomach first. When she keeled over in pain, he pushed her backwards into the wall. She fell onto the floor, and he continued kicking her in the legs, ribs, arms, anywhere but her face. He knew that wasn't so easily covered up like the rest. She put her arms up to protect herself, begging him to stop, and he eventually backed off, only to grab a glass from the cupboard and throw it at the wall just above her head. Before leaving the room, glass rained down, scraping her head and arms. A trickle of blood rolled down from her forehead into the corner of her eye, blurring her vision. This wasn't the worst he'd ever done to her, but it still cut deep. The physical pain stung, but the emotional agony was far worse. How could the person she loved treat her like this? She lay there on the floor for an hour before forcing herself upright and cleaning up the broken glass. Brendan was already asleep, so she showered, bandaged herself up, changed into pajamas, and got into bed beside him, all the while planning her escape. Brendan was used to her forgiving him every time he had one of these episodes. He was very good at manipulating the situation to make her feel like it was all her fault. He would buy her flowers, tell her he didn't mean to hurt her, but that it wouldn't have happened if she hadn't entertained him, been so careless, left such a huge mess for him, etc. She was always the one who ended up apologizing. Little did he know, she had wanted to leave him for months, but was terrified that he may actually kill her if she tried. She was also always a little hopeful that he would change, because she did still love him, as much as she tried not to. After the last 3 times, though, she no longer cared if he changed or not. She needed to get herself out of this permanently. "Kat, you there?" Becca's voice startled her back to the present. "Sorry. Yes, I'm here. Just distracted. Still have so much to do before Brendan gets home. I don't want him to see this mess. Plus, I have to make dinner and do the laundry still. Can I call you tomorrow?" "Yeah, of course." Becca paused. "You know, he could be helping you with some of that too. You shouldn't put so much pressure on yourself." She had never liked Brendan, had tried to convince Catherine not to marry him because she got a bad vibe from him. Too bad Catherine hadn't listened. "I know. I'll talk to him. Love you. Bye. Love you too." Catherine hung up the phone and took a deep breath. Bending down, she reached under the sink, behind the garbage can, and pulled out the bottle of cyanide. Again, she poured a tablespoon of it into a teacup, then started boiling some water. She had decided on this method because she had read that it was clean, simple, and often used by housewives with horrible husbands. There would be no messy cleanup, and it was so easy to slip something into his food or drinks without being detected. One thing he did appreciate about her was her cooking skills. She knew her way around a kitchen, and he always ate everything she made. She had mixed in a good amount of cyanide into the cookies, hoping he would eat a lot of them. But just in case, she would also be putting some in his tea, which would be waiting for him on the coffee table when he got home, next to a plate of cookies. If he offered her some, she had planned on her excuse being that she had already eaten one, and that was enough. Brendan liked her skinny, and often commented on how much she ate, so he would understand. Just as she finished mixing the cream and sugar into his tea, she heard the sound of Brendan's tires crunching gravel on the driveway. She looked out the window to see him climbing out of his car. Catherine took one more quick look at everything she had prepared. "I think this is it. This either works or it doesn't. He dies or he kills me. Either way, I'll be out of this hell." He came through the door, tossing his briefcase down on the ground. "Honey, I'm home. Where's my kiss?" Brendan called out. Catherine hurried over, reaching up to give him a quick peck before helping him with his coat. She felt a slight twinge of sorrow as she realized this would likely be their last kiss. But she pushed that thought out of her mind by reminding herself how he has treated her these last few years. He'd isolated her, insulted her, beat her, made her feel like she was worthless, and then made her think everything was her own fault. Fuck him. "I made your favorite browned butter chocolate chip cookies. Come have a seat," she offered, putting on a big, fake smile as she hung his coat on the coat rack. "Great," I'm starving. I had a rough day at work today, he said, taking a seat on the couch. She noticed he didn't say thank you, as though this kind of greeting was just expected of her and warranted no appreciation. She watched as he took a sip of the Earl Grey cyanide tea and then a bite of one of the cookies. These are delicious. They taste a little different than usual, Brendan said. Yeah, I tried something a little different today. Catherine smiled at him. It's good. Hey, is this a new rug? He finally noticed, taking in the brown, patterned, synthetic fiber rug below his feet. Catherine's heart jumped, but she remained calm. She had prepared for this. Yeah, I saw it today and thought it would look perfect in our living room. And later, you'll look perfect, all rolled up in it, she thought to herself, holding back a smirk. Well, I think a gray rug would have been better. We will have to pick out a nicer one this weekend. Nice effort, though. He finished one cookie and started on another, taking a sip of tea in between. So condescending. I can't wait till he shuts up for good. Okay, baby, she said, turning around and heading into the kitchen so he couldn't see her expression change to annoyance. Catherine pulled the water jug out of the fridge and poured herself a glass. Behind her, she heard Brendan cough and say, I'm not feeling too well. Did you do something to these? She turned around in time to watch him vomit on the new carpet and clutch his head. His head must be killing him by now. Headaches and vomiting are some of the first symptoms of cyanide poisoning. He laid his head back on the couch, dazed. I'll have to make sure he doesn't leave any vomit on the couch, too. I really don't feel good. Call an ambulance, he begged, quietly. His body began to shake with convulsions. Seizures were another symptom. Catherine stayed silent, watching as he slowly stopped seizing, and then breathing all together. She quietly took pride in freeing herself from such a monster. Someone who pretended to love her, only to hurt her more deeply than she'd ever been hurt, was truly monstrous in her eyes. She felt a wave of relief wash over her as she mourned the last 5 years of her life. No one should ever have to endure the kind of abuse she had. And now, he could never hurt her or anyone else ever again. Now, all that remained was to get rid of his body. A small smile tugged at her lip as she set to work. The above story ends, but the suspense and thrill have never stopped. Right here is another equally interesting story. Please continue listening. T for 3. Checking the day's schedule, Maud looked forward to meeting her first-time client, Silesia. Her daily prep included the wide variety of tea blends sufficient to the day's demands. Maud called her social events pours. Modeled after the traditional Japanese tea ceremony, she aimed deeper than mere tranquility. Her delicious, blended teas reoriented her clients' views of themselves and the world. She tailored each concoction individually by adding herbs and essential oils. Every ingredient was organic and non-toxic. Of course, it was all legal. Maud acquired her skill by studying under a Peruvian shaman for a decade. Her second scheduled client called himself Ted, not his real name. Maud hadn't met him, but she knew him well. A columnist at the local newspaper, he was her most strident critic. Maud intended to reorient Ted's views, good and hard. Ted and other critics claimed Maud ran a cult. She scoffed at such descriptions. They've obviously never attended my tea parties. Clients choose to return. They're not compelled. She maintained a low public profile. Finding self-promotion distasteful, Maud didn't advertise. She didn't need to. Word of mouth brought most of her clients seeking relief from a life out of balance. They generally left happy. Critics wondered why no one in City Hall cared to lift her veil of secrecy. Maud dismissed rumors, claiming she was a close confidant of politicians and society mavens. Maud admitted to modifying the tea ceremony into something unique. Her pours were for anyone seeking to rebalance. The pours logo was a modified yin-yang symbol, depicted as floating within the bowl of a bamboo spoon. She didn't tell fortunes, wasn't a guru, and didn't run a seance. Nor was she a matchmaker, though some had found love after meeting through her. That was serendipity at play, not Maud. Maud also adamantly rejected the term therapist. She firmly rejected suggestions her pours were a form of group therapy. She abhorred insinuations that she practiced without a license. As the appointed time for this day's pour approached, Maud prepared a special tea for Ted. Not knowing Silesia's needs and temperament, she waited. Her standard blends would do until she knew more. Maud resisted temptation regarding Ted. Poison was an option to which she refused to stoop. But she had prepared something special for him. Maud was confident that when Ted left the pour, his attitude would be radically different from the one he brought. With a few minutes before the pour, Maud sat in silence, with her hands folded. The bell rang. Maud opened the door to Silesia, wearing a short, strapless sundress and a broad-brimmed straw hat. Silesia thrust out her hand. "Maud? Yes, welcome to my pour." Maud waved her in and saw Ted coming up the walk in a suit and tie. She introduced herself and led them to the dedicated pour room. Silesia talked rapidly. "It's such a beautiful day. Perfect for a little tea, don't you think?" Maud nodded. Ted lagged behind, taking note of the decor and the layout of the house. Silesia continued without pausing for breath. "But it's so beautiful. A shame to spend it cooped up inside. I love going down to the river walk and watching the ducks and the boats and the birds flying overhead. The trees make such lovely shade. and each fluttering leaf responds to every slight breeze. Is there any way we can reschedule? I hate to waste the day inside. Once in the room, Maud indicated where they should sit. Well, you're here now. We won't be all day, bright and shadowless. The poor room had no windows. No pictures adorned the walls, which had climbing vines painted on them. A ficus tree stood in one corner. A low table sat amidst plush pillows. A table beside Maud had a gas fire, teapots, space for preparation, and teacups. Silesia and Ted did a little dance, trying to decide who should sit where. Maud pointed and said, "No, Silesia there. Ted, please sit here." They sat. Silesia giggled like a little girl. Ted's face shifted between annoyance and boredom. Maud prepared the tea with bamboo utensils and served them each a cup. She said, "This first cup should relax you. Take a moment to enjoy. Sip carefully. It's hot." Silesia downed the cup in one gulp and screamed as she spit it out. She grabbed a napkin and wiped tea off herself and the table. "Wow, sorry, that was hot." Ted rolled his eyes. The first serving of tea was intended to break the ice. Maud never wanted clients to think of their poor experience as akin to riding in an elevator. They were past that. Whatever their stated purpose, Maud sensed subtle emotional currents at work. Her blends worked to rebalance each person, regardless their emotional state. Wanting the tea to bring everyone into a state of calm, she poured them another cup. She leaned toward Silesia. "Are you okay?" "It's hot." "Hot. Right. Got the message." Silesia blew on the cup and sipped. "Oh, this is good." Maud turned to Ted. "And how are you, Ted?" Startled from his reverie, Ted took a moment. He reined in his disdain for what he thought an elaborate charade. "This is different from the expected traditional tea ceremony." "Oh, what have you heard?" "I never tell people to expect that." "Well, to start," he pointed at Silesia, "this badly dressed, classless woman is rude, won't stop talking, doesn't carry a fan." Silesia scowled and rummaged through her purse. Pulling out a battery-operated fan, she switched it on. The little propeller spun, blowing strands of her hair back. With eyes fluttering, she smiled at the breeze in her face. Giggling, she aimed it at Ted, blocking the draft with his hands. He said, "Never mind. Turn it off. Keep it to yourself." Silesia winked at Maud and, giggling, returned the fan to her purse. Ted said, "So much for tranquility. This is my point. How do you dare pretend this tattered facade is a tea ceremony? You exhibit only the shallowest grasp of time-honored rituals. This is just a load of frayed, New Age claptrap hiding behind the trappings of a traditional tea ceremony. I'm sorry, my pores have been misrepresented. Would you like more tea? I mean, where's the respect, the purity, and the reverence. Maud held her look. After a moment, he held his cup out. He wouldn't let go when Maud tried to take it. Careful not to burn him, she refilled his cup. It's hot, I know. He gave Silesia a stern look and brushed off his leg. Maud noticed that Silesia had begun to fidget. She declined more tea. Silesia, tell us what brings you here, she sighed. It's all about my roommates. They aren't pets, but they're hamsters. Well, about 6 months ago, I was feeling lonely in my beautiful, spacious apartment. So I bought a couple of friends. Hate to have to buy a friend. Seems so entitled, but can't exactly meet a hamster at the local club. Maud nodded. Ted rolled his eyes. He whispered, "Can't you shut her up?" Everything was cool for a while. We got on famously. But then one day, I came home and discovered an extra dozen of the little critters. Who knew? All in one cage? Appalled, Silesia practically shouted. Oh, no. I would never cage my friends. What do you take me for? Agitated, Ted said, But is right. That was only the beginning. I've lost count. And that isn't even the worst part. Neither Maud nor Ted wanted to hear the worst. I discovered that they ate one of them. Maud nodded impassively. Yes, but nothing. I admit, I'm not that bothered that his family ate their baby brother. I mean, get real. Babies do get eaten. But poor little Jimmy. I'll never forget when I found little Jimmy was the hamster. Silesia looked at Ted like he was a lunatic. Focus, Ted. The circle of life and all that. I miss him. And Maud said, yes, I cannot get over. She dabbed her eyes with a napkin. Maud and Ted leaned in. After everything I did, just can't believe that they ate meat. Ted feigned a coughing fit to cover his laughter. Silesia waited for it to subside. I mean, what did I do wrong? How could they? Didn't I raise them right? You know, to be vegetarian. I thought they were... I didn't skimp in sympathy. Maud touched Silesia's right hand. She covered Maud's with her left. Maud placed her free hand on top of Silesia's. Misty-eyed, they turned to Ted. He said, "Looks like you're first at bat, Maud." They didn't understand. He said, "So, is this it? Sorry, but I have to get on with my day." Maud straightened up. No, Ted. Now that we're in sync with each other, I'll serve another tea. One made for you alone. A special tea? Just for me? Oh, boy. Maud resisted trying to kill Ted. She wouldn't poison him. At least, not in the usual way. But I'm not about to let this hack destroy everything I've built. She wanted Ted's comeuppance, not his life. This potion would take his words, silence him, at least for a few days. He said, "So what's in this special tea?" "Hold the cyanide. Only he laughed. Maud said, I can't reveal my secret recipe, but it contains a mixture of frankincense, sandalwood, ylang ylang, rose, pepperum. I could go on. You get the idea. Ted and Silesia were awed at the complexities of Maud's preparations, and Silesia, don't feel left out. I've also designed a special blend for you. They sat expectantly. Maud poured Ted's tea from a pot she'd set aside and handed him the small porcelain cup. He reached out, but stopped. Putting his hand up, he shook his head. No thanks. The cup is chipped. I'll pass. Maud recovered. You don't understand, Ted. It's not a chip. Only an irregularity in the glaze. These rare cups are highly prized, eagerly sought for. Ted couldn't care less. Silesia watched, fascinated. Maud continued. You've heard of the Japanese tradition of mending a broken bowl with a vein of gold lining the crack? This is similar, Silesia said. Oh, don't waste it. Give it to me. She reached out, but it wasn't made for you. It's Ted's. Don't worry. I'll manage. It sounds delicious. This had never happened before. And this tea was pivotal to Maud's plan. She said, if you insist. Ted said, we all do. Silesia took Ted's cup, sipped, and smiled. Beginning to speak, she stopped and could only say, more? Not used to losing control? Maud refreshed Silesia's cup. Ted smiled at Silesia. Ah, miss, the power of the well-chosen word. Silesia nodded, but could say nothing. Ted turned to Maud and said, good, you shut her up. At last. I'll have some too, Maud said. Yes, you need something. I can't have you go thirsty. Deftly switching pots, she poured him a cup of calming tea. They each smiled as he took the cup. He raised it in a mock toast and sipped. Wow, that's delicious. He loosened his tie. Maybe you sensed this, Maud, with your acute observational powers. I need to tell you. I write a column at the paper. Commentary, reviews, opinions on the world at large. He leaned forward and took Maud's hand. I am happy to say you've earned yourself a glowing review, Maud replied. Ted? You? A writer? I had no idea. She refilled his cup with tea, promoting a positive attitude. Go with the flow, she thought. Silesia remained silent. Ted waxed poetic. Tranquility reigned. Let's continue with the next, no less thrilling stories. Pebble. Rain pattered against glass. Burnt beans overtook the scent of fresh bread. Voices overlapped as stories were shared and gossip was spilled. The game played on the TV. We were winning. The buzz in the air was almost intoxicating. Even the rain couldn't dull it. Gray stared at the brown liquid. Steam rose, collecting into beads of sweat as his face hovered over the cream-colored mug. Blonde curls curtained flushed skin and bleeding lips as his teeth pulled at the delicate skin. He was in his own air. The buzz flowed around him. His ears were stuffed with the nectar of the past. It seeped out, dripped down his arm, burned through his skin, revealing scars that were hidden with years of neglect. Nails cracked as he dug into the wooden table. His mind swirled. The nectar was thick. It was creeping through the crevices of his head, consuming thoughts he pushed down and forcing him to face it. Metal filled his mouth as Gray bit down harder on his lips. Pain filled his face, and the sob got stuck in his throat. Taking a deep breath, he picked up the mug and took a sip of the bitter liquid. It stung at his bruised lips, but the taste was welcome. A deep breath led to long sigh, releasing tension as he slumped over the table. Pebble? He clinched his eyes closed as his mind flooded. The bricks of the dam slammed and slammed against the limit of his conscious as the memories flooded over him. Gray scrambled across the sticky ground. He gripped at the blood-soaked hoodie, pulling the small body into his arms. His fingers left trails as he rubbed at the bruised skin, hoping his touch would wake him up. Pebble, come on. What he thought was a yell was nothing more than a cracked whisper. Shaking hands gripped at curls that were just like his, just a bit brighter in color. He just kept repeating himself, holding the one good thing in his world, rocking him back and forth like he had to do to help him fall asleep just a couple years ago. A few feet away, smoke rose from the fifth cigarette lit today. It found its home between cracked lips. Lips that never once said anything that portrayed an ounce of care. Those lips belonged to a woman of dirty beauty. Beautiful blonde curls that have been passed along for generations framed a pretty pale face that was stressed by a chosen sickness. She stared at the scene, the bodies that were her offspring, at least by the doctor's words. But just 'cause the doctor said it doesn't mean she cares for it. The law forces her hand, forces her to obey her parental expectations, but it can't make her look at them with anything but an icy indifference. That indifference made her not care when they cried, when they needed to be held, when they needed someone to praise them, when they won, and support them when they fell. That is why, when her youngest was beaten with vase after vase until the glass shards impaled him because he whined too much, she didn't move a muscle. One less expense. Tears were dripping into his coffee, little splatters staining his clenched hands. He took one and bit on it, holding inside his screams as what happened just a few hours ago replayed. Stepping inside the decade-old home, the wood creaking with every step, the excitement he felt with Deku swinging in his pocket, imagining the look on Pebble's face as he held his favorite character in his hands. Then the way his soul dropped into the pit of his stomach. How his vision blurred until the only thing he could see was his little brother laying on the smoke-infested rug, his blood making it an even darker shade of black. The glass fractures, creating a mosaic of different colors that flickered in the light of the dusty swing lamp. Knots formed at the bottom of Gray's stomach. It burned. It hurt. The more he pushed it away, the more it forced itself forward. Their mother sitting there, watching, dusting the ashes off her pants. Their father's snores, traveling from down the hall. He bit into his skin until it split. Luckily, his shirt was black. No one could see the blood that was making it stick to his chest. Just the dirt that's layered on top of it. He couldn't leave his brother laying there. Someone had to bury him. Someone tapped him on the shoulder. Gray turned his head, blood trailing down his chin. "Are you okay, honey?" It was a middle-aged lady. Her hair was thrown into a tight ponytail that made her sharp features pop out even more. He licked his sore lips. Looking down, he had bit into the white meat of his hand. Blood trickled down his skin and dripped onto the table. Puffy eyes, blood-tinted skin and lips, dirt-stained clothes. Gray knew he looked a mess, swallowing his answer. His voice probably wasn't going to work anyway. He grabbed his coffee mug and walked right past her. Curious eyes probed at him as he walked towards the glass doors. Someone behind him was asking him to wait. But he didn't listen, or he couldn't hear. Either way, he walked straight into storm, the rain soaking his body in just a few minutes. Puddles splashed, cars honked, wet grass coated abused shoes. Gray let his feet lead the way. They brought him to the park. It was empty, of course. He climbed onto the playground, crawling his way into the little tunnel, the one place that was still dry. Somehow, he was still holding on to the mug. He took a sip. It tasted like brown water in the tube, surrounded by the rain cascading down. He let himself cascade. Sobs spilled out until his whole body shook. His hands not able to find the right place to stay. He kept trying to stick them in his pockets. But then he remembered Deku wasn't there. It was tight in Pebble's hand. He gripped his hair, his scalp protesting. His mother's nonchalant figure, his father's peaceful rest, Pebble's warm body lying there, still. It lit something in him. Everything he was holding inside, all that he kept hidden, to keep a smile on his little brother's face, all he dealt with to protect him, everything he never gained that he gave. His sobs trailed off into a coughing spill. His mind broke. The pain spilled over, the cuts, the bruises, the memories. The mug cracked in his tightening grip. his shaking hands from the cold, or his anger he didn't know. With a crack, the mug spilled into his lap, and a deafening scream spilled from his lips, the force bruising his already sore throat. It filled the tube. The storm swallowed it, taking his pain into its grasp as his vision blurred with red. And the next story will be told right away. Please listen carefully. Bloody tea leaves and fucking coffee beans. They banned folks from toting teapots and kettles, classifying them as weapons of war. Frank remembers clearly that day, the day Dictator-in-Chief declared a state of emergency. Remembers all the stooges and quislings who clapped. Remembers the collective liberal orgasm, and how the elites, academics, and cultural icons collectively smirked. Then came the run-of-the-mill anecdotes, soldiers whose scalded limbs had been, or had to be, amputated. Women whose lives had been altered because the long arm of the law couldn't prevent their partners from keeping tea leaves and coffee beans on their shelves, under pillows, and in their pockets everywhere they went. Even children were paraded about, exploited as a major reason tea and coffee had to be abolished from both street corner and corner cafe. Of course, Starbucks and Dunkin's went into a frenzy. Their lobbyists and plants in press rooms went to town. They were neither alone nor wrong. Frank and other tea addicts and coffee fiends went into overdrive too. Government officials, armed to the teeth, retaliated, confiscating cups, teapots, and everything construed as having the potential for making tea. Even bloody spoons. He fought back when they kicked his front door in. He was made a prisoner under the law, but worse, under a presumptuous therapist. 2. You think I'm crazy, don't you? You think I'm all bonkers? What makes you think I think that, Frank? That you just did it. What did I do? Tried to be clever. People like you? People like me? Yes. Like you. Yes. Like my wife. Educated. Yet godless. People like me loathe people like you as much as you hate us, she asked incessantly, and prodded deeper. He eventually talked about war, about his role in the last one, and about man in general, and the eternal romance between him and war. He licked his lips and rubbed his hands together as he spoke. You want to know why man keeps to war, Miss Hatina? She nodded. War don't file for divorce. She choked on her own saliva. We'll come to your ex-wife later. Let's stick to the war for now. They talked about it briefly. A lukewarm room becoming warmer. If you've never watched a friend's head split in half, you've no reason to sit there and tell me about this BPST nonsense. All this PTSD, whatever the creature's name is called. I saw real creatures, fought real dragons. Death was both my enemy and soulmate. She sat there and listened, and listened, and listened. With 7 minutes on the clock remaining, she finally cleared her throat. I don't understand everything you went through, Frank, and I'll never pretend to. My job is only to help. He nodded. She continued, because there's some good place in your soul, Frank. I want you to lead me there. Meanwhile, I'll be interpreting the road signs as we encounter them for you. Do you want me to come along? He smiled. The soldiers guarding his fort chose to lower both sword and spear. I guess you, the 6-foot-something battle-hardened soldier in the arena of the mind, Miss Hatina, you're correct. But since we'll be walking to a faraway place together, I guess you can call me Rose. Rumor had it I'd be talking to a Mrs. something. She showed him the finger where a ring used to be, and Frank, well, beamed. 3. They banned them from toting teacups, spoons, sugar basins, and so forth. That's why you won't find them on Main Street anymore. Starbucks was shut down. Dunkin's will follow soon, unless they agree to sell frappes and ice cream exclusively. Beverages that don't burn women and children. Frank finds himself in a maze, zigzagging his way in the slippery alleyways of downtown Kiwagama to quench his craving for the hot stuff, a thirst he contracted on the front lines. Dilapidated buildings cry through rusty gutters. Neon lights stutter like a car with insufficient dinosaur juice. A black cat meows and crosses in front of him. A dog howls at the thinnest slice of moon cosmically possible. A drunk slips. His bottle turns to powder in a muddy puddle. Steam rises from a manhole. Dear steam. A whiff of it dances towards the moon. Like an apparition, a shadow appears from around the corner and whistles at Frank. He follows. Not long after, an iron door gaps its jaws open and swallows Frank and his guide. Men with steaming teapots and kettles on the verge of hissing surround him. The spouts are longer than Pinocchio's nose after his girlfriend asks how she looks in some silly Halloween costume. Salt water germinates from his every pore, and his bladder tightens as they frisk him. Satisfied, they conceal their beverage brewers in their roomy jackets. He's led up a staircase whose stairwells are carpeted by needles, broken bottles, and used condoms. The air is damp and putrid. Steam rises. Steam, steam, steam. He shivers from steam that refuses to be blown off. Steam that, left unchecked, will one day be sufficient to power a dystopian locomotive. A CCTV camera buzzes. Feet are dragged towards the door. Crimson light radiates from a peephole before the deadbolt clinks. "Come in," says a tall, broad-shouldered fellow with a huge scar waiting to spring from under his long beard and show its fangs. For, in every session thereafter, she helped him paint a picture. He talked about war, asked about university. She painted the experience in mostly positive terms. "Loads of hookups?" he said. They were getting too cozy. "Not enough," she answered with pouted lips. "I noticed a hickey on your neck the other day, coupled with what you just told me. Is that why you broke up?" cold intimacy, the lack thereof. Frank, this is all I'm going to say about this. I was once upon a time a happily married woman, until I wasn't. Well, that makes two of us, if it makes you feel better. You see, I might not have fought a war, but we've so much in common than you think. He beamed. Do we now? I believe all humans have. What really happened, Rose? I understand the power dynamic here, but even Mussolini dangled carrots. She laughed. Okay then. We got lazy, grew tired, and drifted apart. He blames me, and I blame him. You've kids? No, Frank, we don't. Do you date? She froze and cursed herself for being sidetracked so easily. Tell me about your upbringing, Frank. He talked about his childhood stammer, about his first crush, then opened up about his father. All my friends had their dads present growing up. They went fishing, threw ball, showed up at games. What did I have? An absent dad and absent-minded mother whose descriptions of my pops when we had conversations about him were pretty ugly. Basically, called him a brute. After which she'd tell me I was my father's child whenever I did something. Like what? Hit someone in the head with a bat. She jotted something in her notebook. He started to realize, on his own, how the heat of life and circumstance has been bringing him to a boil ever since childhood. No wonder he felt like exploding and powering steam engines while at it. He talked about how he found himself in a vortex of alcohol, syringes, and women with brown teeth and skimpy clothes as soon as he hit puberty. Why do you think you went there? She said, sipping hot beverage he said he'd never been a fan of. Truthfully, bigger boys convinced us smaller ones. That was what being a man was all about. But you didn't like it? Well, you know, even hell has its moments, I'd wager. She chuckled. What changed? An STI. She giggled some. He saw it and chuckled wryly. I realized being a man doesn't always mean you should die early or pointlessly. Like, if you're gonna die early anyway, like I always felt I would. Why not spend your short life in the defense of others? You became a man, definitely. Served my country, came back, got married, had a kid. Then she left with another man. A long pause in which all the sound heard was sipping and stirring of tea. But ironically, the steam which rose to the ceiling and covered the room in a feu wasn't from the beverage. It was from the purple reservoir of his emotions. She'd to turn the air conditioner on. After his kettle stopped whistling, she ventured. How did that make you feel? That I should have died in the war. What about now? Sweaty, hot, fuming, jealous. I don't know. You're lying to me, Frank. Redness reappeared on Frank's face. I feel like shit, if you really want to know. Why? That's what I'm here to understand, ain't it? I'm here to help. Just. It alternates between I screwed up, my wife screwed me over by screwing some screw up, or the screw up who screwed my wife screwed me over. My mind ain't sure what to hold on to. Ex-wife now, Frank. Remember, she's water under the bridge now. A thick vein popped on the man's forehead. She was stolen from me. She made a choice, Frank. His voice brewed a purple storm. They took the house. My fucking house. By law, Frank. Frank threw the notebook on his lap at the window. It sublimated into shards. He pushed the couch back violently and wagged his fist at thin air. They took my daughter from me. Is that the law, too? No? Yes? Well, I'll tell you what. The law is wrong for taking my daughter away from me. The law is bloody wrong. 5. The dealer finishes a call before his attention turns to Frank. 2 ladies flank him on either side, gyrating slightly to the thumping of 808s coming from an adjoining room. There's a bouncer on each of the 4 corners of the makeshift office space. My boy, Frankie. When my boys told me about you, ain't believed shit they said. Said you was a big man now. Told them every big man's working for me since the ban. He laughs. But here you are. You done become bigger than a hippo. In good ways, of course. Thanks, Bobo. What if I make you offer? Huh? For old time's sake. Frank fidgets excessively. What offer? Come work for me. There's good money here. Big, fat money to be made. An older lady brings Kraus whiskey in 2 glasses. With all due respect, Bobo, says Frank soon after the lady leaves. Ain't looking for no job. The room goes taut. So why's you here, Frankie? They take turns to sip the old man's health. Frank's gaze darts about. For, you know, the thing? Frankie, don't try to be clever with me. I know you here for the hot stuff. But why is what I ask you? Because, Bobo, only you knows how to get things like that. Bobo smiles proudly. What you want the hottie-hottie for? Self-defense. There's an entire ministry of, I trust my own fingers than the entire ministry. Bobo laughs and claps his hands. Perfect. Had to test you to see whether you bulk under pressure or not. I only deal with solid folk. He regards Frank for a bit. The latter breathes heavily. Steam blows out of his ears and nose like a malfunctioning toy dragon. But he keeps still. I ain't one to judge. But anger breeds nothing. Frankie, nothing. Forget that woman. You come work with me. There's plenty of women to pass around here. See all this? Plenty. Does the package you suggesting include my daughter? Bobo gestures for something to be brought into the room. He does the sign of the cross. Anger burns you, Frankie boy. You, not nobody else. God won't say, I didn't warn y'alls. They bring the man his order. A collector's wet dream. Like one of those brewing pots Grandpa used to keep, and Grandma used to pester him about. Why you don't keep it as far away from reach as possible. You want your grandkids to be caught up in that life too? Grandpa had a well-known addiction for the stimulant. He'd a lot of scars to show for the burns he'd endured over the years. Because anytime's tea time. That's why. Looks good alrighty, Frankie? Frank nods. Good. But where's the coffee beans? Where's the what? I'm sorry. I'm used to calling, aha! Coffee beans. I think I know what coffee beans is. Gary, you get it too? One of the bodyguards nods when the dealer looks at him. He turns back to Frank. You a clever buggeros, Frankie. Pity you don't want work. We could use some creativity here. Martin, you brought this man a pot of steaming nothing, you see? Bring the man his bloody tea leaves and fucking coffee beans. Money exchanges hands. So does a brown paper bag in the opposite direction. Frank starts to leave. Remember, don't spill the beans about me, Frankie, or my men will spill something hot on your baby girl. And unlike you, I'm a very literal man. 6. They texted and laughed and looked each other in the eye. When they looked each other in the eye long enough, the hands of her eyes pulled his face closer. Space between them crumbled. Their faces rammed into each other's. Sparks flew. Passions exploded into groaning, screaming, and orgasms. They met at the office to talk about demons, online to flirt, and at her place to talk about the future. She showed him a diary she kept when she was 6. He noticed a particular motif. On every other page was a rough sketch of a girl carrying things like knives, razors, guns, and catapults. You wanted to hurt someone? Frank said, after kissing her bare chest. Kill someone. Well, did you succeed? Not that I'm aware of. Who are all these people? Everyone. I hated everyone. My sis was too pretty. My cousin was too liked. Hannah Montana was too popular. She's in here? Flip a page. Again. There she is. God, you were so twisted. What changed? She sighed. A ballpoint pen and a teapot. What? We'd a bully at school. A boy who got away with everything. One time, I snapped and sunk my bic in his face. God, yeah. It was atrocious. Got me expelled. Mom thought I'd learnt my lesson. Grandma thought not. She boiled water in a kettle and called me over. Made me stretch my hands towards the pot. Don't tell me she poured hot water on your hands. Fingers. Yeah, that's a lot better. She's like, every time you let your anger boil over and think about hurting someone, think about this kettle. Today, I'm the one pouring hot water on you. But one day, it will be the world. I'm trying to understand her philosophy, but what does that even mean? Our anger hurts us as much as, or more than, it hurts the people we lash out at. When I'm angry, I think about how much hot water I'm pouring on myself. And it works all the time. Flip a page, again. There you go. That's you in a kitchen. That's me carrying the proverbial teapot. I substituted it for my weapons. Sketched it over a knife or a razor. You can do it too. I'm an army man. They recently banned my kind of weapon. Well, I know you know where to get one if you really wanted it. Please think about my grandma's metaphor and me when you think about hurting anyone ever again. You will? I will. They kissed. His hand rested on a breast. Someone opened the door, saw them digging gems out of each other, and dropped the flower bouquet he carried. She leapt from Frank's lap and rushed after him. 7. Above all else, Frank hates liars. The only person he hates more than he who generally lies is he who lies specifically to him, and everyone seems to take advantage of his willingness to give the benefit of doubt. Politicians lied about the war, about its purpose. Now they're lying about the purpose of some laws. But politicians are known to lie. Who believes politicians anyway, in this day and age? His father said he was going around the block. He never returned. Mother lied about why he chose to do that. To save face, his wife. Don't people take "till death do us part" literally anymore? Then there's Rose. No, she's the therapist now. She was cheating on her husband, with him no less, making him no better than his wife's. She's your ex-wife now, lover. You don't do that. And now she's trying to call. He's not picking that. What for? More bullshit? He languishes in his car, busy brewing. 6 tea bags in a kettle, 6 coffee beans in a coffee machine. He turns the knobs to boil until the lid starts dancing and the spout sputtering. A police siren wails. The cabin turns icy. They pass. Steam resumes. He cocks them both. Oops, better stay with Grandma's metaphor. But it's slipping. They banned these from ever finding their way into hands like his. Because of this, he sees them. He sees her. A hot spring blasts the crown of his head. He's out. He's striding. They see him. Too late. Kettle hisses, then regurgitates. It starts raining on him too. Torrential rainfall at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Just when you think all the weird stuff has been told, the next story will make you think again. Heartbeat of the home. Why can't I remember? He thought. His mind would only reveal flashes of the afternoon's events. His head was on fire, sweat dripping down his face, like an addict on autopilot. Grant Liscombe burst through the front door, avoiding his mother in the kitchen. Like a spider returning to its web, his lanky teenage legs scurried up the wooden stairs of the old farmhouse to his bedroom. His arms flailed with uncontrollable fear as he yanked the dirt-covered shirt over his head, discarded it on the floor, then bounded to the bathroom, slamming the door. "What have I done? What have I done?" he muttered, lathering the perfumed soap through his fingers, frantic to wash the guilt from his newly calloused hands, watching the streaks of dirt dance and swirl down the rusty drain. His mind was confused by broken images of helping to clean the gutters, the ladder falling. Or was it pushed? The thud as Nick's body hit the ground, and the gleam of the metal shovel as Grant dug the body-sized hole. He confronted the reflection in the mirror. The gaunt, bloodshot, black-haired punk he had become. Oh God, what have you done? The reflection glared back with an evil grin. It began about a month ago, after his factory worker stepfather, Nick, lost his job. Grant's middle-aged mother, Jane, with little work experience, was initially grateful for the offer to stay at her aunt's derelict house, remotely located in the Haliburton Highlands of Ontario. Soon, she would regret it. They arrived late on an October evening, rain pelting down. The overwhelming stench of mold and decay nauseated Grant as he stepped onto the porch, past two white rattan chairs resembling broken skeleton bones. Like two cracked teeth, the front window panes whistled as Nick opened the door, and a rush of twisted oak leaves fluttered into the foyer, landing at the base of an antique grandfather clock. "Wow, look at that beauty," Grant exclaimed, smitten with the intricate carvings of the mahogany cabinet, the shiny gold filigree face, moon dial, and hands, all in pristine condition, a sharp contrast to the rest of the house. "Hey, Mom, didn't Grandpa have a clock like this?" He set down his backpack, rubbed his hands over the smooth, flawless finish, inhaling the rich smell of lacquer and lemon polish, opened the case to wind the weights, then set the hands to the correct time. "Yes, he did," she answered, removing her coat and shaking the rain from her short blonde hair. "But not as old as this one. Remember what Grandpa always said? The tick of a clock is the heartbeat of the home," they repeated in unison, their heartfelt laughter filling the room with his memory. "But seriously, Grant," she said, pointing at the clock. "That thing gives me the creeps." Grant shrugged. Then, as he tapped the pendulum to start the clock, he felt a sudden chill in the air, a quiver in the continuum of space and time. The walls around him seemed to expand and contract, like the lungs of the house had taken a deep breath. "Are you all right, Grant?" His mother's face concerned. "You look pale." "He's fine," said Nick. "Quit coddling him, Jane. He isn't a child anymore." He chuckled and gently kissed her forehead. "I'll finish bringing in the rest of the stuff." Grant sensed something was terribly wrong. Something had taken control of his body. His mind shouted with fear as his consciousness slipped deeper into an abyss, and a different, cunning voice answered, "I'm okay, Mom." After the family had settled in for the night, the clock softly chimed the midnight hour, and its demon contemplated setting its evil plans in motion. Returning to his room, Grant changed into clean clothes and put on some loud, heavy metal music. He suspected his mother was having issues with his new identity. He began rifling through his closet, not sure what he was looking for. Then, at last, he found it: the metal slugger baseball bat. As he held the handle, he confirmed that Mother was next. "Grant," his mother called from the kitchen, aroma of roast beef wafting up the stairs. "Are you guys done outside? Dinner's almost ready." The stairs creaked with warning as he descended each step, slow and deliberate, bat at the ready. A satanic song blared out of his room, the heavy bass pounding the walls. Thump, thump, thump. "Turn it down," she shouted, stirring the gravy pot, steam filling the room from the whistling kettle. But his music grew louder. He continued his mission, unhindered. From deep inside, Grant could feel the raw hatred of the demon inhabiting his body, its cruel intention, but was powerless to intervene. Suddenly, like a beacon of light through the darkness, he heard a familiar voice. "Remember the heartbeat of the home." It was Grandpa. "Grant," the voice said, "kill the heartbeat." Jane Liscombe turned off the stove and stormed out of the kitchen, down the hall, stopping at the grandfather clock at the base of the stairwell. I said, "Turn it." Stopping mid-sentence, she screamed and jumped back, just as the bat came crashing down, barely missing its target. Grant gripped tighter, then swung again, this time hitting a home run as the bat smashed the glass of the grandfather clock, dislodging the pendulum and sending it flying across the room. The chimes clanged noisily in pain as he swung again and again until the battered clock showed no signs of life. Grant's grandfather's undying love had helped him overcome the demon within him and return to H.'s former self. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, reaching out to hold her, just as Nick came limping through the front door, rubbing his head. "Nick, you're alive!" Grant shouted in surprise and relief, running to hug him. "Nick, are you all right?" "What happened?" Jane asked, still badly shaken. "I thought he was holding the ladder," he said angrily. "Must have fallen and knocked myself out." He looked around in disbelief at the shards of glass and pieces of wood scattered on the floor. "What the hell happened here? I'll explain in the car. We've got to leave. Now," Grant exclaimed as he helped Nick and his mother out of the house. They drove to the nearest motel, never to return. 2 years later, a young couple turned the key in the tarnished brass lock of their newly rented farmhouse in the Halliburton Hills, and as the war sunlight shone into the foyer, a spectacular sight was revealed. A beautiful mahogany grandfather clock. I remember her, the first time I laid eyes on her. She knocked at the wooden door. I knew it wasn't an adult knocking. I just know these things. The sound was light, timid, and just a bit too low on the door to belong to someone grown. I walked across my living room, the floorboards creaking under my weight, and unlocked the door. As I pulled it open, the hinges groaned softly, and there she was, standing on my porch, waiting for me. She came to me, And I knew it was her. I knew right away she was the one I'd been waiting for. I felt it. It's hard to put into words, but if I had to, it was like being struck by lightning in the pit of my stomach. A surge of electric energy coursing through me and ending in a sharp, tingling burst at the base of my skull. She was tiny, small even for her age, and her presence seemed to shrink further under the weight of the gray autumn sky. Her long blonde hair framed her round cheeks, dampened slightly by the drizzle that had been falling all afternoon. Her light blue eyes, startling in their clarity, reflected the dull brown of my front door, as if they were trying to absorb everything around her. She smiled then, just a flicker of a smile, timid, shy. It might have been imperceptible to someone else, but I saw it. I knew it was there. "Hi," she said, her voice barely louder than the wind rustling through the bare trees. I crouched to her level, studying her face as if I might find answers etched in the softness of her features. "Hello," I replied, the word catching in my throat. Her small hands clutched a green box close to her chest, a makeshift tray hanging from her neck with an assortment of colorful packages. "I'm from Troop 195 of the Girl Scouts," she said, her voice steadier now, though still carrying a gentle, unpracticed rhythm. "I'm selling cookies to finance our trip to Washington next year. Would you like to help?" I blinked, her words pulling me from the strange fog that had overtaken me since I first saw her. "I'd love to help," I said, forcing a smile. "What exactly are you selling?" She brightened, her confidence growing with every word. "I have caramel chocolate chip, Do-si-dos, lemon-ups, and thin mints." I nodded slowly, leaning one arm on the door frame. "Those all sound delicious." And they did, each one of them. I wasn't lying. I'm not a liar. I've always tried to tell the truth, to open up to anyone who showed even the slightest interest in, well, in me. It's rare enough that someone does. "Which ones would you suggest?" I asked, genuinely curious. "The Do-si-dos are the most popular," she replied, a practiced response, one she'd probably used at every house she'd visited. I tilted my head. "Are those your favorite?" Her expression softened, her small fingers playing with the corner of a box in her tray. "No, I like the Girl Scouts s'mores. But," she hesitated, her eyes meeting mine, "we're all out of those." She seemed genuinely saddened by that, and I could see it in her eyes. That's something I've always been able to do. Read people, see the emotions they hide behind words and smiles. It's a sensitivity I've had since I was a boy, and it hasn't faded with time. "How about this?" I said, my voice lowering, like I was sharing a secret. "Give me 2 boxes of Do-si-dos now, and when you get more Girl Scout s'mores, I want you to come back here and bring me 10 boxes of those." Her face lit up, her smile blooming into something real. and full. It wasn't timid anymore. It was happy, proud. She looked like she'd just conquered a mountain, a small victory in a world that often feels insurmountable at her age. "Really?" she asked, her voice rising with excitement. "Really?" I said, reaching into my pocket and pulling out the cash. I handed it to her. She reached for it, her movements unhurried. And as she did, I let 3 of my fingers graze the back of her small hand. It was a fleeting touch, imperceptible to her, or at least I thought it was. But I noticed how her skin quivered ever so slightly under my fingertips, like the faintest ripple in still water. She quickly pulled the money back, her attention shifting as she counted it with practiced efficiency. Then, tucking the bills into the small pouch at her side, she handed me the 2 boxes with both hands. She held them out as though they were treasures, precious and fragile, the way a child often treats even the simplest things. "Thank you so much," she said, her voice louder now, the earlier shyness melting away. "I'm happy to help," I replied, meaning it. She turned to leave, clutching her tray of cookies like a prize. At the edge of the porch, she paused and looked back at me, her eyes wide and sparkling with gratitude. "I promise I'll come back when we get more s'mores. I'll be waiting," I said, watching as she skipped down the driveway, her small frame disappearing into the gray drizzle. I stood there for a moment, holding the boxes of cookies in my hands, feeling a strange warmth that wasn't entirely explainable. It wasn't about the cookies or the sale. It was about the way her smile had lit up the gray, how her small victory had momentarily lifted inside me. I closed the door and set the boxes on the counter. For a long time, I just stared at them, my mind replaying the exchange. Something about it had settled deeply in me, a seed waiting to grow, but her room wasn't ready. I needed to get it ready for her, to make it perfect, comfortable, a place where she could grow strong and healthy and happy. She deserved that, so I worked at it tirelessly, transforming the cold, gray basement into a beautiful sanctuary. The walls, once lifeless and bare, were painted a soft, light pink, the kind of color that whispered warmth and innocence. A bed with a quilted blanket sat in the corner, flanked by a small table with a lamp shaped like a butterfly. I built a shelf, filling it with hundreds of children's books, toys, and dolls. Every detail mattered. A camera sat discreetly in the top corner of the room, its lens fixed on the space where she would sleep and play. It wasn't about control. It was about safety. I added a lock to the heavy wooden door, one that could only be opened from the outside. It wasn't to trap her, no. It was to keep the world out, to ensure nothing could hurt her. The best part, though, was the shopping. I spent hours picking out clothes for her, envisioning her wearing them, imagining how she'd look. I chose soft fabrics in bright, cheerful colors, clothes she could wear now, and some she'd grow into over time. Each piece felt like a step closer to her, to making her mine, and then I waited. I waited for her to come back. Days turned into weeks, and still I waited. The 2 bites of cookies sat on the counter, untouched. I couldn't bring myself to open them. Instead, I would trace my fingers along their edges, touching the cardboard like I had touched her hand. Sometimes, I'd lift one to my face, inhaling the faint mix of packaging and something else, something peculiar and fleeting. The smell of her, the anticipation was unbearable. A constant hum under my skin. Each creak of the floorboards, each knock at the door, sent my heart racing, hoping it would be her. But she didn't come back, not yet. I knew she would, though. She had to. I'd made everything perfect, and then, one day, her knock came. It wasn't just any knock. It was her knock. I knew it instantly, even before my body moved to rise from the couch. I felt it in my chest, in my veins. A spark of anticipation coursing through me. The moment I'd been waiting for, the moment I'd been preparing for, was here. The chance to see her again, to look into her bright eyes, to show her what I had built for her, because of her. Because she was the one. It was her. I crossed the room in a few quick strides, unlocked the door, and pulled it open. There she stood, with that smile. It wasn't as shy as before, more certain now. Like she knew she was welcome, like she belonged here. In her hands, she held a neat stack of cookie boxes, her reason for coming back. Or so she thought. I smiled at her, a warmth creeping into my voice that I couldn't mask. "It's good to see you again," I said. She beamed, her cheeks flushed from the cool air. "I have your cookies, and since it's such a big order, I added a pack of lemon ups for free." "Well, now that's very kind of you," I replied, my tone light and friendly. I slipped my hands into my pockets, pretending to search for the cash. My fingers met empty fabric, as I knew they would. I hadn't carried any money in weeks. The truth was, I didn't want to hand her the money here on the porch. Not this time. I needed her to come inside. I looked up at her, feigning a small chuckle. "Looks like I forgot my wallet. It's inside, in the kitchen," I said, gesturing behind me. It wasn't a lie. I don't lie. I never lie. My wallet was in the kitchen, sitting right on the counter, next to the untouched cookie boxes from her first visit. the ones I had been saving for this moment. Her smile didn't falter. She nodded, clutching the boxes tighter. "Oh, that's okay," she said, ever the accommodating Girl Scout. "Why don't you come in?" I asked, stepping aside and motioning to the warmth of the house behind me. "It's cold out there, and you've been walking all afternoon, haven't you?" She hesitated for a moment, her gaze flicking to the open door, the inviting glow of the living room beyond. Then she smiled again, this time with a hint of excitement, like this was just another part of her adventure. "Okay," she said, stepping inside. I closed the door behind her, the sound of the latch clicking into place, sending a thrill through me. It wasn't loud, but to me, it echoed. I turned to her, my smile steady, my heart pounding. "Make yourself at home," I said, my voice calm and even. "Let me grab that money for you." She nodded, her eyes wandering around the room, her curiosity as innocent as ever. She was perfect. Perfect. And she was finally here. Oh, do I remember her? The way her muffled cries felt against my left hand as I pressed it over her mouth, lifting her from the ground with my right arm. She bit down hard and kicked wildly, her small shoes landing against my legs, but I barely felt it. I told myself it was normal. She didn't understand. Not yet. She couldn't comprehend what I had done for her, what I had built, the sacrifices I had made. Not yet. Her body thrashed against mine as I carried her, her weight so light it felt like she might vanish. But she wouldn't. Not now. Not ever. I took her down the stairs, each step an echo in the stillness of the house, and through the door. Not a room, not just any room. Her room. This was the place I had prepared for her. The place where she would grow, where she would finally be safe, where I could ensure nothing and no one could hurt her. I would see to that. Only me. I would witness every moment, every milestone. She would know, in time, how much I cared, how much I loved her. I threw her onto the bed, her small frame bouncing once before she scrambled back, pressing herself against the pink walls I had painted just for her. She screamed, her voice raw and high, tears streaming down her red face. "Please, let me go. Please," she begged, her words garbled through sobs, her tiny hands clawing at the quilted blanket I had chosen with such care. But I knew it would pass. It always passed. The crying, the yelling, the fear, it would all melt away after a few weeks. It always did. She just needed time to see. Time to realize that this wasn't what she thought it was. This was better. "It's okay," I said, my voice steady, calm, trying to cut through her cries. "You'll understand soon. I promise." Her tears only fell faster, and her words dissolved into incoherent sobbing. I watched her for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest, but not from regret or hesitation. It was from the sheer anticipation of what was to come. This was just the beginning, and like I said, I don't lie. I never lie, but they didn't understand that. They didn't understand anything. They took her away from me just 3 days after she got here. 3 days. That's all the time we had. They stormed in like animals, breaking through the front and back doors, screaming, their boots pounding on the floors. I had walked in peace for years. And the guns. Oh, the guns. Pointed at me. At me. Me, who had kept her safe. Me, who had given her a sanctuary. A place where she could be loved, cared for, where she could grow without fear. They didn't see the love in my eyes, the care in my hands, the way I had worked so hard to make her life perfect. They only saw their own distorted version of the story, their judgment cutting through my truth. They didn't understand. Oh, I remember her. I've remembered her every single day for the past 24 years, 364 days, and 6 hours. I know because I've counted. I've counted every second, every breath, every heartbeat that has passed since the moment they tore her from me. But now, just a few more days, just a little more time, and we will be reunited. Finally, I've waited for this. I've prepared for it because, like I said, I don't lie. The next story will begin now. Clock is a tickin'. Freeze, jabroni. Don't make a move. Carl almost burst out laughing until he turned around and saw the camouflage gear-festooned, rodent-faced man pointing what could only be a large-caliber handgun directly at him. I told you don't make a move. Now turn around and put your hands behind your back, shrilled the man with the gun. Carl, a tall, thin, balding man with blue eyes, was no longer in a laughing mood. In fact, a sense of ice-cold terror was trickling down his spine. He'd never had a gun pointed at him before. Teetering on the edge of panic, Carl asked the armed man, "Just to be clear, do you want me to freeze and remain still, or turn around and place my arms behind my..." "Shut up, jabroni! Just do what you're told, and nobody gets hurt," barked the gunman. But Carl saw a cloud of confusion pass over the man's rat-like face. Immediately, Carl instinctively knew the man had never pointed a gun at anyone before, and that knowledge placed them on a level playing field, at least to a certain extent. "Hey, look, man, I don't have any problems with you," Carl said as calmly as he could. "I'm just here. Look, my wife got me a new tarp for our trailer for Christmas, and I'm just here to strip off the old tarp and throw the new one on. Who are you, anyway?" Carl's trailer was parked next to the Skookumchuck River in a remote rural area of Washington state. Beautiful in the summer, but right now it was December 27th, and freezing rain was dripping from the slate gray sky onto the small collection of aging recreational vehicles parked along the muddy banks of the Skookumchuck. I got no problems with you either, provided you're not a Fed. Now show me some ID. The armed man was still barking orders, but it was clear that the burst of adrenaline was waning, and his voice had lost its threatening edge. Quit pointing that gun at me, and let me get my driver's license, okay? What's your name, anyway? And what are you doing here? Carl said, as he showed the man his Oregon driver's license. You went across state lines, huh? Not a bad idea. Well, shit. I guess we gotta stick together in desperate times anyways, don't we? The name's Victor, but you can call me Vic. Damn nice to meet you, Carl. Sorry I was less than welcoming, but you know how it is. Vic said, tucking his pistol into his pants and drawing the back of his hand across his nose before offering Carl a manly handshake. This here's my trailer, Vic said, casting his head toward an RV about 20 feet from Carl's. Well, technically, it belongs to my Uncle Kevin, but he's too damn old and doesn't truly appreciate the magnitude of the threat. Carl took a deep breath. Suddenly, he felt somewhat restored to his equilibrium. He knew Kevin. Shit. Carl had been parking his trailer in these woods for about 16 years. He was at least casually acquainted with the other campers and fishermen who frequented the site. As Carl internalized the vital information that Vic wasn't just some random lunatic or escaped convict, he said, "Holy hell, Vic. I know old Kev. Known him for years. Wait, the magnitude of... What is this threat you're referring to?" Vic went still, and his hand wandered to his waistband, where the gun was tucked away. He gave Carl a skeptical stare, and then silently assessed their surroundings. The gentle roar of the river was a backdrop for the occasional chirp of a bird. But otherwise, all was silent. Vic's eyes flickered up into the evergreens and peered into the underbrush, but nothing moved. There was no breeze, and the rain was just a mist that hung in the air, along with the scent of moss. Carl belatedly realized that Vic had been out in the woods for a while. His jawline was scruffy, and the pores on his nose were black and visible. Dirt was caked under his fingernails, and his hair was stingy and greasy. "What threat?" Vic hissed. "You playing games with me, Carl? Because you wouldn't be out here if you weren't keyed in, and I don't appreciate being toyed with." No. That's not what I meant. Listen, I'm just trying to understand your assessment of the threat, Vic. We need to share intel if we are gonna get a handle on the... Shit, man. You want some beef jerky? Carl asked, as he yanked a packet of Jack Links out of his pocket and tore it open. Vic accepted a hunk of jerky and gestured that Carl would follow him to his trailer. After about a dozen steps, Vic stopped in his tracks and surveilled the tree line for snipers. But soon enough, they were ensconced in the comfy confines of the almond beige wood paneling in old Kev's RV, chewing jerky and discussing strategy. Soundgarden issued softly from the tape deck as Vic chuckled and said, "Leave it to the computer nerds to completely disregard the obvious fact that we are gonna run out of digits. Goddamn educated idiots is what I call, hello?" Vic could do a pretty accurate Jerry Seinfeld impression. "Sweet fancy Moses. Yeah, but what'll happen? What's gonna happen when the clock strikes midnight on New Year's Eve?" Carl asked. And Vic just shook his head and said, "Boom. Digital apocalypse. We run out of digits. Think about it. Our entire lives, ever since the invention of computers, we've been running on 2 digits. Wait, what?" Carl said. "There are shitloads of digits, like 8 or 9 at least." "Let me ask you this," Vic said, leaning forward. "What year did you graduate high school?" "Class of 94, Carl said. "And the year you were born?" Vic insisted, leaning closer. 75. "What's your point?" Carl said, confused. "My point? My point?" Vic said, locking Carl in his beady gaze. "My point is that when we go from 99 to 2000, boom, digital apocalypse, brah. Nobody has ever thought of the consequences. There are no guardrails in place, no safety net, Carl. Think about it." Realization dawned on Carl as he said, "Vic, how the fuck did you figure all this out? Do you work for the CIA or something?" Vic just chuckled and slowly shook his head. "Ever heard of dial-up internet jabroni? My parents have it in my dad's office in the basement. Let's just say it's not just for email and porn anymore. I've done my own research." "Fuck," Carl muttered, collapsing back into his chair. "Do you think my ATM card will stop working?" "I'm afraid it's much worse than that, amigo," Vic whispered. "It's effectively a Mayan calendar scenario. The end is upon us, and we are gonna need to be prepared." The fucking Mayan calendar?" Carl, suddenly animated, exclaimed as he threw his truck keys to Vic. "All hands on deck, Vic. You are the wheelman. I'll watch your 6. We need to get down to the 7-Eleven before dark, fuel up the rig, and load up on ammunition. 10-4. "Carl," Vic said over his shoulder, but he skittered to a stop just before they reached the truck, grabbed Carl by the front of his jacket, and said, "We are gonna need a lot more of this jerky, Carl. We need to sequester as many more packs of Jack Links as we can. Do you read me? I read you loud and clear, good buddy. Now let's get to gettin'. Clock is tickin', jabroni. Clock is a tickin', dial tone. Dirges, Tijuana, Mexico. Pay phone. Outside Mercado El Popo, 1999. Sound of coins clinking, dialing tones. Aló? ¿Quién habla? Myra. Es Leah? Leah! Dios mío! I can't believe it's you. We've been going crazy here. Your mother comes to my house every day asking if I've heard from you. Where are you? Are you okay? I made it to Tijuana. I'm at a payphone near the market. The phone keeps eating my coins, so I don't have much time. You sound different. Your voice, you sound sick. Are you sick? I'm not sick, Myra. Just tired. So tired. Remember how we used to stay up all night studying for Senora Martinez's chemistry exams? This is different. I haven't really slept in days. Days? Leah, you're scaring me. Everything is scary here. Remember how we used to talk about leaving Venezuela? Making plans in your backyard? Drinking your mother's terrible café con leche? Sound of traffic passing, horns honking. Of course I remember. We were going to be roommates in Miami, get jobs at fancy hotels, maybe even meet Ricky Martin. We had everything figured out. We were so naive, Mayre. So stupid. We thought it would be like the movies. Save some money, buy a plane ticket, start a new life. But the visas, they kept rejecting us. And now you're with the coyotes. Leah, everyone here knows someone who didn't make it. Please come home. Home to what? The markets are empty, Mayra. The hospitals have no medicine. Remember when my little brother got dengue last year? Mama had to trade her wedding ring for antibiotics. I can't watch my family live like that anymore. Warning beep from the phone. Hold on. Need to add more coins. Sound of coins dropping. Myra, I have to tell someone. I can't keep carrying this alone. Tell me what? What happened? The group I'm with. There was this girl. My age, maybe younger. From Guatemala. The coyotes, they made her carry drugs. Inside her body. Little packets, like grapes. She cried all night before they made her swallow them. Dios mío, that's not even the worst part. There was this woman with us from El Salvador, in her 50s with grandchildren in Los Angeles. She showed us their pictures the first night. She couldn't keep up in the desert. Her legs just gave out. Leah, we left her there, Mayra, under a cactus. She begged us not to go. She promised she'd rest just for an hour, then catch up. I told them I would stay with her. I couldn't bear the thought of leaving her alone. But she grabbed my arm, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, "No, mi hija, one death is enough." She made me promise to go. She made me do it. Sound of crying, voice breaking. I had to go, Mayra. I had no option. I had no option. I had to run to catch up with the group. I could hear her praying behind me, her voice getting fainter and fainter. We tried crossing that same night, but there was a massive drug bust happening near the crossing point. Cartel activity, border patrol everywhere, helicopters with searchlights. The coyotes said it was too hot, too risky. We had to turn back. Now we're stuck here in Tijuana, waiting to try again. And all I can think about is how we left her there, alone, with just those pictures of her grandchildren, sounds of street vendors calling out in Spanish. I can barely carry my own jacket now. It weighs more than all our school books combined. Remember how we used to complain about those heavy books? Bitter laugh. What I wouldn't give to be back in that classroom now. You can come back. Please, it's not too late. It is. There's no going back. The desert, it changes you, changes everything. I see things at night when we're trying to sleep. Shadows moving. Sometimes I think it's the border patrol. Sometimes something worse. The coyotes watch us constantly. One girl tried to run away last week. They caught her. She came back with bruises. She wouldn't explain. Background chatter in Spanish, English, and indigenous languages. Last night, we tried crossing through the river. Everyone said it would be safer than the desert. But there were farmers on the cliffs above the river. Farmers with rifles, Myra. They didn't shout warnings, didn't tell us to go back. They just started shooting. The water, voice breaking. The water turned red. People were screaming, trying to swim back. But the current was so strong. We had to stay underwater, holding our breath, praying they wouldn't see us. A mother lost grip of her baby's hand. I can still hear her screaming, "Por Dios, Leah." Some people just disappeared under the water, never came back up. The farmers just stood there, watching, like they were hunting animals, not watching people die. Human beings, parents, children, dreams. Warning beep from the phone. I keep thinking about what Papa used to say before he died, about America being the land of opportunity. But he never knew about this part. The nightmare you have to survive to reach those opportunities. If they catch me, I've heard stories about the detention centers, but I can't go back, Mayra. There's nothing left in Venezuela. There's your family. There's me. We love you. Love doesn't fill empty stomachs. Can't buy medicine. Can't build a future. The inflation. It's worse now than when I left. My mother's entire month's salary can barely buy a week's groceries. I have to make it, Mayra. I have to. Sound of more coins being inserted. You know what I think about most? Those stupid telenovelas we used to watch after school. Remember how we'd laugh at how dramatic they were? Now I understand. Real life, real desperation. It's more dramatic than any telenovela. Leah, please. You're trembling. I can hear it in your voice. I am. I'm scared all the time. But I'm also angry. Angry that this is what it takes. That we have to risk our lives just for a chance at a decent life. That farmers with rifles get to decide who lives and who dies. Distant police sirens. The coyotes are signaling. We're moving again tonight. Mayra, if something happens to me. No, don't you dare say goodbye. Listen to me. If something happens, tell my mother I understand now. Why she cried when she found out I was leaving. Tell her I'm sorry for the pain I'm causing her, but not for trying. Tell her what she always told us. La esperanza es lo último que se pierde. Hope is the last thing we lose. Leah, please, and Mayra. That night before I left, when we stayed up planning our future, those dreams we shared, keep them. Maybe not Miami, maybe not the fancy hotel jobs, but something better than this. Promise me you'll keep hoping. I promise. But you have to promise to stay alive. I'll try. I have to go. They're waiting. Don't forget me, okay? Never. Leah, wait. Te quiero, Mere. Maybe next time. Maybe I'll call you from the other side. Sound of coins running out, followed by the click of the phone being hung up. Then a dial tone. The above story ends, but never stops. Here is another story that will not disappoint you. Distorted. I left home 5 years ago. As soon as I crossed that stage, high school diploma in hand, bypassing my peers, swept up by a wave of crying mums and proud grandparents. I was done. The boot of my car held as much of my 18 years of life as I could stuff into 3 boxes and 1 suitcase. I'd armed myself with a bank account full of every tip and paycheck I'd received from my waitressing job and an early acceptance offer from a university 2 states away, as far as I could get from a place I'd once called home. The night before, as my parents sat in some fancy restaurant for a reservation with friends they'd forgotten to tell me about, undoubtedly arguing with each other behind plastic smiles, I packed away my clothes and books and bed sheets in neat little rows until my room was almost barren. Apart from the old wooden furniture, my bedroom was cleaner than it had probably ever been, and I laughed at thinking about how, if the situation was different, it might finally make my mother happy with me. At 10:07 p.m., they arrived home, my father slamming the door as their whisper shouting floated upstairs. I knew they weren't being considerate of the fact that I might be sleeping, but rather they worried about the possibility that a commotion might alert the neighbors, that they would see through the cracks in the foundations of their picture-perfect dream house. They didn't come in to say goodnight. Hadn't since I was 8, and old enough to read myself to sleep. As I pulled out of the parking lot and left my formative school years in the back windshield, I thought about what my parents would tell their friends, the neighbors, the busybodies in the grocery store checkout line. Would they lie and tell everyone I had accepted a scholarship for some prestigious university overseas? Or maybe I'd traveled to Africa to work in humanitarian aid, something they could brag about and say, "She's made us so proud." Possibly, they'd invent a job with NASA or an internship at Google. They hardly knew enough about me to know what I'd actually be studying or what I wanted to be when I grew up. I was sure they wouldn't be bold enough to tell the truth, that their daughter had disappeared without warning while they spent their day in board meetings and having sex with their personal assistants in hotel rooms paid for by their companies. There would be no missing persons report or flyers offering an egregious sum of money in reward for my safe return home. Nothing that would cast a shadow on their spotless reputations. I would fade further into the background of their lives, as if a figment of their imagination, only resurrected when one of their friends spotted me in one of the professionally shot family photos, stilted and artificial, and asked after me. That's if they kept the frames up at all. My parents would have to dig up my coffin from the deepest parts of their memory, plaster a smile on their face, and grit their teeth. They would spin some vague anecdote about speaking to me on the telephone last Tuesday and how well I was doing. And maybe they'd go visit me at Christmas. They'd have forgotten all about me by the time they brought out the first course. I mean, they hardly remembered I existed, even while we lived under the same roof. That's why I was so shocked when they called me one Sunday, 5 years after I left town and never looked back, and asked me to come for a visit soon. I had no idea how they knew my number. I'd changed it after moving and never given them the new one. That's why I didn't respond for almost a minute after hearing my father's voice through the tiny speaker. I almost convinced myself I was dreaming or having a stroke. Maybe I'd temporarily slipped into an alternate reality where it was normal for my father to have my number, to call me out of the blue and invite me over. Anything to explain why the fuck he was calling. There was no special occasion. Nobody was sick and dying, and there was no upcoming birthday to celebrate. They just wanted to see how I was doing and make amends. They missed me, they said, through the crackling of the landline. I wondered if they had finally snapped and gone crazy, if they'd learned a sense of humor and this was some kind of prank. Or perhaps they had early onset dementia and had forgotten that I had never been much more than a roommate they had complained about having to spend their hard-earned money on. I told them I would think about it and immediately hung up. I spent the next 2 days trying to forget about it altogether until I came home from work to a letter in my mailbox. a one-way ticket dated 2 weeks from then, set to arrive at the airport an hour out from the town I grew up in. On the front of the envelope, my address, written in my mother's sloping, elegant handwriting. Nausea settled in the pit of my belly. How did they know my address? I'd not kept in contact with a single person from my childhood. The hairs on the back of my neck tingled as the growing sense of being watched settled into my skin. Then a thought popped into my head. Had they known the whole time? Had they known where I was all these years and never bothered to reach out? Suddenly, I was 12 again, and realizing my parents were never going to care about me the way the kids at school were cared for. This confirmed what I had always known. I was alone in this world. It took some deliberating, but I decided I would go. I would see what it was they wanted from me, and if they really had changed. I told myself I wouldn't give in to whatever manipulation tactics they might pull. I would be strong and remain distant. And when it was done, I would demand that they never contact me again. Even still, my bones were heavy with paranoia the following weeks. I elected to hire a rental car to drive from the airport to their house. There was no way I'd give my parents the satisfaction of driving me, of having any modicum of control over me once more. And this way, if I needed to leave, I wouldn't be forced to wait 20 minutes for a taxi. I parked on the street. The house had been repainted a soft, eggshell color instead of the previous gray and rows of gardenias lined the fence where there had once been neat box hedges. I breathed deeply through my nose before raising my hand to knock. My mother pulled the door open as my fist made contact with the wood, causing me to stumble back. She must have been watching me from the window. Waiting, she was smiling. That was strange in its own right, but it was weirder because I knew it wasn't my mother's smile. Her smile never reached her eyes. She would never do anything that would cause lines to form on her face. Her smile always gave you the sense that she was laughing at you rather than with you, pitying you. My mother did not smile, but when she did, it was always forced. This was a genuine smile. It was happy. I felt immediately that something was deeply wrong. A shiver ran through my spine. There was something wrong about her face. It was fuzzy around the edges, as if she was wearing a mask. I rubbed at my eyes with closed fists, trying to clear my vision. But the effect remained. I figured I was tired from my flight, but the closer I inspected her, the clearer it became that something was off. It looked as if someone had tried to draw her face as accurately as possible. After taking a long glance at a picture of it, my mother reached towards me with outstretched arms and drew me into an embrace. I stood stiffly, with my arms by my side, trying and failing to remember when she had last hugged me. surely at some point in my childhood. Definitely not after the age of 10. She invited me inside. This house was nothing like the one I'd left. Cold and sparse, decorated as if a model home. It was warm and filled with color and light. I wondered if somehow my memories of my horrible, lonely childhood had managed to warp my recollection of the house itself. But I knew that wasn't right. This new hallway was illuminated by a warm glow, and funky paintings hung from the walls. The dining table was set with a red gingham tablecloth that my mother would have called tacky, and a vase of sunflowers. In the kitchen, my father took a large tray out of the oven before pausing to take a long pull from the neck of a beer bottle. I had never seen my father drink beer before. He used to say it was the common man's drink, and that real men drank whiskey. He turned to say hello, and where his face had once been clean-shaven and professional, stubble grew freely. Like my mother, something was off. And it wasn't just the facial hair. His nose was smaller than I remembered. Eyes just a fraction too far apart. From afar, or at a passing glance, it was the man I'd grown up with. But as he stepped closer to greet me, his features shifted. It was like looking at an optical illusion. And when I changed my gaze, the true image would slip into place. They watched me. To anyone else, it might seem they were worried, for I hadn't said a word since my mother opened the door. But I could see it in their eyes, the suspicion. They were wondering if I'd noticed, waiting for me to say something. I stuttered out empty platitudes about being happy to see them, and they shuffled me over to sit at the table. Dinner was pistachio-encrusted chicken breast served with a peach and goat cheese salad. When my father announced the menu, I stopped short, fork raised halfway to my mouth. My mother was allergic to pistachios. This was a fact she despised, as she perceived any sort of weakness to be a flaw, and my mother was not flawed. I said as much, but my mother just stared at me with an odd look and told me she didn't have any allergies. She never had. And then she went on eating, cutting her chicken into bite-sized cubes and placing them delicately on her tongue, never breaking out in hives or becoming short of breath as her throat closed up. I was beginning to feel as if I was going out of my mind. I managed to stumble my way through conversation, letting my parents do the brunt of the work, barely processing a word they said. I excused myself to my room, citing exhaustion and an early night. My father followed with my bag, and as I reached the top of the stairs and turned right towards my old bedroom, he laughed at me. It wasn't the same boisterous laugh he'd had at dinner when discussing his golfing buddies. It was sharp and croaky, like it didn't belong to him. I hadn't seen my father laugh enough as a child to know which one was more his own. "My bedroom was to the left," he said, with a curious look on his face. "Don't you remember?" And he pushed past me, guiding me down the corridor to a room I knew was not mine. I followed him slowly. Inside the doorway, he dropped my bag, calling good night over his shoulder as he moved back downstairs. I locked the door. The furniture was the same, but there were pictures on the wall I had no recollection of. Myself and my parents at the beach and in the snow and with my grandparents. These were not my pictures. My mother hated the sand, and the first time I'd been to the beach was with some uni friends a year after I left home. I had never met my grandparents, let alone taken photographs with them. They had both died before I was born. I sat down on the bed. It was made tidily, with the same striped sheets I had packed in a box all those years ago. I sat there for hours, listening as my parents cleaned and made their way to bed. When I was sure they were sleeping, I slipped out the door and into the rental car. As I drove to the airport, heart racing against my rib cage, I knew one thing for sure: the cabin in the cave. The sun began to fade behind the gray, overcast plateau that Ethan was hunting on, and darkness began to take over the lonely Mesa de Blanco wilderness once more. It wasn't long ago when the already threatening sky had turned an angry, boiling, black color, and it had begun to rain down hectic sheets of bitter snowflakes and tiny shards of stinging ice. He squinted furiously around him, looking for any sign of the animal he was currently hunting. He had found some spoor of the massive beast a little way back, and was a little surprised when he found out that the trail seemed to lead directly to the snow line of Mount Blanco, and then seemed to wind about the trees in the sparse forested areas. He knew its lair had to be nearby. Most people would have called the wilderness around the White Mesa beautiful, or serene, or perhaps breathtaking. But right now, in this bitter cold, he thought that maybe stark, bone-chilling, or bleak would better describe it. Ethan had seen this particular plot of God's good earth many times before, had wandered its trails, climbed its cliffs, waded its streams, and stalked its woods. It was referred to affectionately by most of the people in Ethan's profession as Greenhorn's Grave. It had been many years since he had been in this part of the Southwest, and for good reason. The game was sparse, and the land was inhospitable. The local townsfolk of Mesa Pueblo had sought out Ethan the last time he was at the local trading post selling his furs, and had told him of how, for the last 3.5 weeks, they have been tormented by a gigantic ghost cat, and that if there is anything he should not do, it would be to go out at night. Apparently, not soon after the last full moon, the livestock around the sleepy village of Mesa Pueblo started going missing. Large livestock. There were holes ripped through fences, and large tufts of white fur caught sticking to barbed wire, but no bodies were left behind. People started seeing the phantom cat ghosting about outside of town, and swore that it had glittering pink eyes. It loved killing livestock, but within a week, it had started targeting children. Any poor child wandering too far away was very liable to be snatched up, especially during night hours. There was very little blood. Apparently, the giant wildcat was taking all of this food back to its lair to eat the majority of it and leaving nothing behind. It was the largest animal any of the people had ever seen, even larger than a grizzly in size, but only short glimpses had ever been seen of it so far. There was no noise made when it attacked, not even from its victims. The majority of the people of Mesa Pueblo were elderly and children, with scarcely a man between 15 to 50. They said they would like to buy Ethan's services and have him hunt down the giant ghost cat. The prospect of hunting this dangerous and legendary game, albeit in the unforgiving Mesa de Blanco region, intrigued Ethan. And to think of what price the pelt would sell for when the deed was done. It seemed like a profitable situation, but only a fool jumps headlong into the dark. So he quickly went about gathering more information about this incredible beast. Most people were too scared to say anything useful. But a boy on a ranch on the eastern outskirts of town said he saw it and could even draw how big it was. Ethan watched in stunned silence as the boy pulled out a piece of charcoal and started making long, hard lines along the wall of one of the outer barns. When the boy was done drawing, he wiped his brow and stepped back to admire his work. On the peeling barn wall was the outline of an enormous cougar, and the height of its shoulder went above Ethan's head. The kid wasn't a bad artist, Ethan had to admit, but the thing was way too big. Really, kid? You must be joking. That's bigger than a bear. The kid emphatically shook his head in the negative, then threw his hand toward the wall to emphasize his work. Grande fantasma gatto, espiritu gatto, the boy exclaimed. But when Ethan shook his head, the boy sighed dramatically in exasperation, and then grabbed the cuff of his jacket and led him to the other side of the barn. There is where he saw the paw print the enormous cougar had left behind in the mud. Ethan's foot easily fit in it. Ethan was no small man. When Ethan returned to Trading Post, a few eager locals looked up hopefully, wondering if he would take the job. "I'm going to need an advance," stated Ethan. He was going to use some of the advance to upgrade his old equipment. Ethan's current arms didn't have enough power to do the job, and they also had distinctive quirks that made firing them extremely dangerous in life or death situations. If he was going to do the job, he was going to do it right. A few minutes later, after meeting with the elder chief and obtaining the advance, Ethan was at the local gun shop. Old Bessie was an aging scattergun, well beyond her years of useful service. She was traded for the largest caliber rifle they had, a Winchester Model 1886, chambered to fire a .50 caliber Buffalo killing round. It held 9 rounds in a rotating clip, and he was sure it would be able to put out the firepower he would need to put it down. If not with 1 shot, maybe 2. The gun shop owner wouldn't even hardly look at the worn Colt Patterson he was carrying. Cap and ball were frowned upon these days. So he decided to keep the old .36 caliber as another backup. When Ethan started haggling over the price of the Colt 45 Single Action Army 45 SAA, the shopkeeper just put her hands meaningfully around his hands, which were still holding the gun, and said, "Tu mantienes." Ethan grunted in response. "Fine, but I'm just borrowing it. Do you have bullets?" "Oh, and gunpowder." An hour or so later, and Ethan had found lodgings at a homestead around the west side of town, in the area where most of the sightings happened, and at a place which had been devastated by the ghost cat. Grandma Theodora Ecketts ran a pretty decent operation, breeding horses. Her business had recently come crashing down when Phantasmagato had started hauling off her male studding stallions in the middle of the night. Now she only had a couple of foals and a mare or 2 to her name. Her work hands and her daughter wouldn't leave her, however. They said they never would, no matter how bad it got. The ranch was their life. Grandma Ecketts wasn't complaining. In fact, she was in a cheery mood since she found out Ethan was going to be staying with them, because she had another person to cook for. She at once proclaimed Ethan too skinny, and went about filling his plate with all sorts of tender meats, all seasoned perfectly and cooked to perfection. Ethan had excused himself after dinner and went out back to sight in his weapons. He placed several cans and bottles on various posts around the main barn area, and then cut a circle in the side of the barn itself to serve as some basic targets. The trapper smiled to himself as he began to twirl the .45 Colt SAA around his right index finger. Then he twirled it a little faster. Then he switched hands and continued to twirl with his left, all in one fluid motion. Then suddenly, the gun ceased moving and the barrel aimed directly at the nearest bottle. Ethan fired from the hip, and the bullet cored into the fence post below the target bottle. He fired again, and it went wide. On the third shot, the bottle exploded. Ethan finished with a last twirl and replaced the SAA in its shiny new hip holster, all in one smooth movement. Clapping could be heard from behind him, and then a low whistle. Ethan turned to see Grandma Eckett's beautiful daughter, Christina, standing there, hands on her hips, half smile on her lips. Standing next to her was Jose, the ranch's youngest occupant, and he was holding onto the top of his cowboy hat with one hand and had an astonished look on his face. Jose's mouth hung open, revealing crooked teeth. "Nice shootin' there, stranger. That bottle didn't know what was coming. And what fancy gunplay," said Christina. "He is like some gunslinger straight from the Wild West." "How did you do that, mister?" wondered Jose aloud. Ethan shrugged. "I have a lot of time on my hands, and not a terrible lot of things to fill it with. This calms my nerves." "Let's see it again, mister. Shoot something else." Ethan nodded, then turned back to the targets, standing stock still. He stood there for a good 10 seconds, lasting until the tension could be snapped with a knife. Ethan pulled out the age 36 Colt revolver, quicker than it takes a bolt of lightning to hit the ground, right-handed, and fired 3 times in a row. 2 cans and a bottle met their untimely demise. "Amazing!" cried Jose, visibly awed. "Well now, with shootin' like that, we sure don't have nothin' to worry about as far as that white cougar that's been prowlin' around, eatin' our people and cattle." "Where'd you learn to do that?" wondered Christina, quite astonished at the impressive display of marksmanship. "My father, some. I taught most of it to myself." Really like a gunslinger," said a woozy Jose, the excitement getting to him a little and making him stumble. "I got a sight in the rifle now," said Ethan, pulling the Winchester 1886 out of the holster on his back. He worried over it a bit before kneeling down and aiming at the round circle he cut into the barn. It wasn't long at all before he fired. 3 times. The sound was deafening. "Holy cow, mister! I never heard nothing so loud in my life." Ethan offered the gun to Jose. "Want to try? I'm warning you, though. It kicks like an ornery mule." Jose shook his head emphatically. No. To witness such perfection was enough. Ethan walked over to the barn and examined his shots. They were closely grouped, lower down, and slightly to the left of center in the circle. It was almost full dark before Ethan was satisfied enough with his arms to go inside and turn in. Now he was out here on the snowy and desolate Mesa de Blanco Plateau, with only his guns for company. And he was stalking an enormous albino cougar through the unforgiving wilderness, and Ethan's prey was a proven man-eater. If it spotted Ethan first, he was sure that he wouldn't even hear the damn thing at all before it had its fang-ridden mouth around his neck. The struggle would be brief. Then it would most likely haul Ethan's bloody corpse back to its lair to munch on at its own leisure. Grim thought that. Still, he was sure he could put the monster down with a good shot or two from the .50 caliber Winchester rifle. It really all came down to who saw the other first. But Ethan was also beginning to worry about the weather. It was starting to snow even harder, and the wind was picking up. With full dark right around the corner, getting caught out in a storm like this could be quickly fatal. He trudged through the icy, blinding snow, eager to find some kind of shelter, or, at worst, a large snowbank he could dig his way into and spend the night. Ethan quickly came up against an impassable, nearly vertical cliff wall, and he skirted along it arbitrarily to the left, keeping the cliff within arm's length to his right. Ethan stoically made it about another half-mile before finding the going almost impossible and the visibility worse than nil. The cold was making his limbs and face very numb, and it was getting harder to move with every strenuous, aching step. Then, like a shining beacon of blessed hope, Ethan managed to catch a glimpse of what appeared to be some kind of torchlight, and it couldn't be farther than 20 feet away. Even in this hellish storm, he was sure he could make it. Ethan stumbled into a cave not a moment too soon, his strength about to completely give out. A cozy series of somber lanterns were lit along the left cave wall, hanging from studs nailed into support posts, or sitting ensconced in cleverly made recesses notched into the rock wall. The cave was unusually warm and inviting, at least when compared to outside. It seemed to have been mostly man-made and was almost smooth. Such was the care that had been made when the tough, mineral-streaked rock had been picked at and blasted thoroughly by dynamite, by at least several men for a very, very long time. Not far in, maybe about 50 yards from the cave entrance, and relieved to be out of the storm, Ethan came upon a quaint mining shack. Its wooden planks built right into the side of the shaft itself. The door to the shack was wide open and was hanging at a severe angle, nearly off its hinges. Ethan also noticed there were some scratches on the wall near the door jamb, but his brain was becoming foggy, and it didn't completely register. He was just so awfully cold and tired. There had to be some kind of boudoir or chair in that old shack that he could sleep on just for a little while until the storm passed and daybreak came. The weary trapper stumbled into the cabin and ineffectually tried to close the broken door behind him. He soon gave up and looked around the room in slumped lethargy. It was dim in here, only one low-lit lantern on a makeshift wooden table in the center of the room. There was only one other piece of furniture, which was a tattered cot in the corner of the room. But at least it seemed to be roomy enough to sleep two normal-sized men comfortably. Ethan put the rifle down in a clumsy motion on the center table then lurched over to the bed in order to lie down. He had barely gotten his boots off and leaned his head back on the straw-filled pillowcase before he drifted off into a deep, seemingly endless sleep in which no dreams came. The last thing Ethan noticed before entering the warm sea of immeasurable darkness was that the bed smelled alarmingly like cat urine. Ethan awoke to find a half-ton of murderous, purring feline on top of his chest, apparently not shy to use Ethan as a bed warmer, sleeping the night away peacefully on what felt like a very full stomach. I should have known better, Ethan thought bitterly, as he eyed the massive canines poking awkwardly out of a foul-smelling cat jaw not inches from his face. He could see tiny bits of meat still stuck in its oversized fangs. It didn't look like it could close its monstrous overbite. And right now, the thing was sawing logs away in a loud and sonorous, purring rumble that vibrated Ethan's chest. Its eyes were closed. Maybe. His arms were pinned to his side, and he knew he wouldn't be able to reach the SAA with either hand because the holster was in the wrong place to grab it under the mass of white fur and teeth that nearly smothered him. The rifle was a no-go. Not until he got this cat off him. The .36 Patterson, however, Ethan drew the .36 in one smooth, slow motion of his right hand, barely even rustling the beast cougar's shaggy fur coat before thrusting the barrel into the cat's side and firing off 3 shots as fast as he could. The effect was instantaneous, loud, and very bloody. The cougar leapt to its feet and staggered off the bed before jumping back in shock. It knocked over the table and sent the rifle and lantern crashing to the floor, shattering it and leaving a burning puddle of kerosene. The enormous ghost cat faced Ethan with its bulbous, pink, glittering eyes, staring hatefully at him through the haze of gun smoke from the .36. It kept its wounded side carefully toward the rocky cave wall. Ethan wiped warm cougar blood off his bearded face. This was going to get ugly. It was somewhat dim in the cabin, the only light coming in through the broken door and the tiny lake of fire burning in the center of the room. And the shadows abounded, merged and commingled in a dizzying fashion. Ethan pulled the .45 single-action army from its holster and aimed it directly at the snarling beast's skull with deadly precision and a steady arm. "Good night, Espiritu Gato," said Ethan under his breath as he pulled the trigger. Thunder boomed. Later that morning, a bedraggled, snow-studded Ethan stumbled back into town. The townsfolk gasped when they saw how his leathers were slashed deeply by what looked like a monstrous beast's paw. On the trapper's broad shoulders was the pelt of a giant, white, now docile cougar that would forever be remembered in Mesa Pueblo as Espiritu Gato, the midnight ghost cat that was slain by the lone trapper Ethan in mortal combat finally bringing peace to a beleaguered town. So today's story has come to an end. Or perhaps it never really ended. There are mysteries still there, questions still unanswered, and sometimes things that seem to only exist in stories can creep into reality in unexpected ways. Are you sure that when you turn off the sound, everything around you will still be normal as before? Or is there something watching you? Either way, always remember that these are just stories, or at least we want to believe that they are. If you like moments of suspense, tension, and breathlessness, don't forget to follow me so you don't miss the next stories. And next time, when you come back, make sure you are ready, because what awaits you may be even scarier than you thought. See you again if you still have the courage to continue listening.